Okay, folks, we're back. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are back, and we are going to do a full hour here. So again, we want you to please tag some folks, have some folks to start watch parties. We're back on. We had some technical difficulties, but we want you to come back, and we want to do this open discussion. We want to hear your questions, your comments, your ideas, your feedback from the past two nights. We know that we were getting a lot of feedback from you guys, but we want to hear even more. So we're going to spend this entire night just talking with you. So please, 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 whatever you're thinking, please let us know. And we want to interact with you. Pastor Yolanda gave an opening statement, and then we were about to get an opening statement from Reverend Rachel Pryor. So we're going to give her an opportunity to do that. And when she finishes, Dr. Mashego will come and do her opening statement. And then as they're talking, start posting your questions, your comments, your thoughts. Pastor Yolanda is monitoring, and so she will share that with us, and we will start to respond. Tag some folks, start watch parties. We should be up on my Facebook profile page, and we should also be up on the St. Mark Facebook page. We should also be up on the St. Mark YouTube channel, and there are others who are starting watch parties. But come on in. Let's get the party started. So Rachel, we're with you now.
Yeah, so thank you. I was just about to share that one of the things we sort of touched on at the end of the night last night was a discussion about reparations. We said the word reparations, and that can be such a scary topic that really is threatening to people in some cases. And so I hope we get some questions about that tonight. I hope we have a chance to talk about it, because I'll be honest, just thinking about reparations in terms of the church is literally something I have not thought about before, I'm embarrassed to say. And it's such a great topic. It's such an important, I think we've talked about the church and the role that we have to play in ending racism, but I've never heard it in the terms of reparations. And I think that's really exciting. I think there are so many different opportunities when you think about it that way. So that's just one thing. There's so many questions, but I know that's on the list. And I think it's one of the harder topics for people to talk about. So I hope we get to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about that too.
Most definitely. I want to start off with a definition, if that's okay. I know that a lot of the time as we're having conversations about just the structure, systemic racism, and it's starting to become so overheard. In other words, people are hearing it everywhere right now. It's a part of the conversation everywhere right now. And one of the other terms that we are including when we talk about systemic racism or the system of racism or racialized capitalism, when we're talking about this, one of the things we also mention is white supremacy. And in order for you to clearly understand from a researcher perspective, when we say white supremacy, a lot of the time white people kind of turn off the message because they feel that, that is not a group that I'm in. That's not a group that I'm connected to. I am not a part of any kind of weird, right-winged white supremacist group. I'm not a member of the KKK. So therefore, I am not a white supremacist. So I'm going to turn off what you're saying right now because it does not apply to me. And when we use that term in the context, that is not what we're saying at all. What we're speaking to is the top rung of racialized capitalism, the concept of white supremacy, that the entire country is latent and built upon. That's what we're speaking to. The fact that Black slaves and immigrants built a country that now they do not benefit from at the same rate or in the same percentages or in the same way that white people do in this country. So I wanted to make sure that I clarified that moving forward into the conversation tonight.
Awesome. And then I want to pick up. Thank you for that. Thank you for all of your comments. And I just want to connect with Rachel's comment about church reparations. That was really profound for me. I hadn't thought about that either, Rachel. That kind of developed in the midst of our conversation, this awareness that as we are telling the story, that there needs to be a different kind of reparation that takes place in the context of the church or from the church, because the church, along with the policing that's undergoing a very stringent reassessment right now, and in terms of our reassessment of capitalism and the need for financial reparations, that there needs to be some kind of assessment about the role of the church in creating a racist society, and then how can the church, in some sense, participate in a process of reparations that helps to heal some of the damage that's been done. So that was really provocative for me too, and I'm looking forward to following up on that in some personal study and reading and thinking, and maybe that's something, Rachel, you and I can do together and work on in terms of a joint project, is work on something of that sort. Also, as we're waiting for folks to start commenting, I'm going to share a letter. I hope she allows me to say it. She's on Mary Balasia from Houston, Texas. Mary, I sure hope I pronounced your name correctly. If I didn't, please forgive me. But we were to work together at Windsor Village United Methodist Church. But she sent me a beautiful letter today, and I look forward to getting a chance to share. I asked if I could share it. I did not get a chance to go back and check my email to see if you said yes or no. So if it's no, you better type a big no in the comments, because you're working again. This is a 7. I'll jump on and start reading the letter, and the one is going like, would you stop putting my stuff out there? And so, but I want to read a beautiful letter. As some later in the conversation, I'll share part of her letter that she sent to me, just thanking us for the conversation and talking about how helpful it is for her. So we'll share that later. And I want to refer to 2 documentaries that have been very helpful to me that I want to recommend to our audience. One is the documentary done by Louis Gates called African Americans, that basically tells the story of African Americans in this country. And it starts from the slave trade and it goes all the way through. And it is an amazing documentary. So a lot of the information that you've heard from us, particularly Dr. Masheko over the last 2 nights, you can get some of that from this documentary, although I think she's brought out some details about stuff that are not in the documentary. But the documentary will give you a grand overview of the story. And I am shocked. I am, to be honest, Rachel, for you to hear me say, I am surprised at how many African Americans are shocked by the information we're sharing. This is stuff that I know, but Yolanda, it helps me to understand why when I hear certain things, when I see certain things happening in our society now, that I freak out about them. And so many of my African American brothers and sisters are going like, what are you so upset about? And I'm like, because they don't know, they don't have the context that I'm out of which I'm working. They don't know that, because if you know that information, then there are certain things, for example, that Donald Trump does that is that are explicit attempts to link to a certain heritage of American history. Right. And I'm like, guys, y'all, and so folks don't know. So it is so important. The other documentary is a documentary. I can't remember who did it. I'll get it and we'll share it before the end of this broadcast. But there's a documentary done called Faith in America that tells the story of faith in America. It's not just Christianity, but it's all faiths. Tells the story of faith in America. And it starts from the very beginning. That's why I got the information about Ann Hutchinson, but it comes all the way up to, now it's a little old, so I think it starts right after the movement of the moral majority and that whole piece. And I think it does a little bit of Barack Obama and his connection to faith. But it is a helpful documentary to help people understand the role that the church has played in the development of our society. All right. So, yes, Yolanda?
Just to piggyback off what you were saying, I think one of the wow moments last night was the loophole in the 13th Amendment, So I saw several of the comments yesterday where it was like, wow. And it seemed as if dots were being connected for people to understand, as Dr. Shauna has said so many times, that this system is not broken. It is operating in the manner in which it was intended. And I think that when that clicks for you, it should be empowering that something needs to be done. We cannot continue in the manner of which we've been doing for so long. So I think if we can kind of highlight that for folks that were not on with us last night, and use that as a segue maybe to stimulate some questions from our social media platforms.
Yes. So folks, I see some folks are on. We're waiting for you. Tonight is open discussion. So we want to hear your thoughts, ideas. If you don't talk, you got 2 sevens on here. And if you don't talk, the 2 sevens will dominate this conversation. We'll get to talking, and no one else will get a chance to talk. And poor Yolanda and even poor Rachel, they'll have to just wait and try to get a break, get a jump in. So, but please let us know, talk back to us, let us know what you're thinking. As we're waiting, I want to share a little of Mary Palacios' letter that she sent to me. And I just want to share this with the panelists so you all will know what a profound impact you had on her. She said, I was unable to listen to the conversations while they were live, but have listened to the recordings yesterday and today. I wish this could be reproduced on a national stage. I have encouraged everyone I know to listen, allow the words to sink deeply into their souls, and to be moved to action by the suggestions of all on the panel, especially Dr. Masheko's methods and yours at the end of last night's message to clergy. And then she talks about Perkins Seminary. That's where I went. And she talks about how they made drastic improvements in what they do educationally. I think Rachel mentioned some of the same thing in her denomination, but at Perkins, how they have revised the curriculum to be much more intentional. So there's an open door. And so what she's basically saying is that what we did over the past 2 nights just ties in so deeply to what's going on. She says, apart from the urban ministry, I learned a great deal from Dr. Theo Walker that helped me get a glimpse of the African-American wounds that continue today. And I hope that the cohorts of clergy that go through the suggested intense theological study of Jesus, education and culture, anthropology, and activism become anti-racist and will include bishops and district superintendents. So I thought that was very powerful. And then she tells a personal story about having gone through this illness where she was having these rapid heartbeats up to 200 beats a minute and just chest pains. And she says that, and as she was going through that, she thought to herself, this must be what it's like for African Americans living in America when you're living almost under siege every day and under rejection and under fear every day, having to deal with that, the chronic anxiety that happens. So Rachel, Mary, thank you so much for your compassion and for your empathy with the African American experience. And thank you for your participation. Mary isn't just talking, she's walking the walk. And I met her at Windsor Village in a predominantly African American congregation, singing in the choir.
Wow.
We acknowledged the call to ministry and began the ministry inquiry process, went off to Perkins. So she has been engaged in the work of living a life that builds bridges across boundaries for a very long time. And I'm so grateful for our dear sister, for her being on. All right. So guys, we're waiting for folks to talk. I guess they want to hear from us. So you all keep talking, and as comments come in, we'll take them.
Dr. Shawn, I think you're...
Yeah, I'm just talking away. Sorry. Pastor Johnson, if it's okay, I'd like to speak to the comment that you shared with me today that was left on your Facebook page by Ms. Bowen. And Ms. Bowen explained, I would like to know what she feels about this group of Black men equipped with bulletproof vests and military armor have and are waiting to have a confrontation with the white supremacist in order to get their 4 acres and a mule. And it's so interesting. When I saw that Black militia, I think I saw those pictures on July 4th. And primarily what's happened is you have several of them that are formed throughout the country, throughout America. There were specific pictures that were taken of this one specifically. I'm thinking that we're talking about the same one. And primarily what they're doing is what Black people have done for many years in different forms. And that is they are resisting. Now, there have been so many different ways that Black people have resisted the current structure, resisted the current mindset, resisted, all throughout history, ever since the idea of them being enslaved and oppressed occurred. They have resisted in one form or another. And always that resistance is immediately dealt with through pain. And so over time, you learn how to resist in ways that are not so painful, but that are still resistance. So at this point in history now, we have this extremely highly charged movement that's occurring. And this movement, I believe, is related to many things. I know, of course, the entire movement is built on top of the idea of the system that is continuously replicating non-justice measures for Black people in this country. But on the other side of that, it seems, and this is the point that I want to make sure that I make to Mrs. Bowen, it seems as though no matter in which way you resist as a Black person in this country, your resistance is met by either pain or deflection from white people. And deflection is interesting because deflection takes on so many forms. And what deflection says is, oh, well, you shouldn't complain because we've made so many strides in your community. Or we had a Black president, so why are you upset? Or, now your people have options rather than before. And so this is a continuous theme where people, when you present them with issues like the issues that we're having, what ends up happening is they will take what you're saying and then gaslight you. In other words, try to make you believe that there's something wrong with you. Well, you're concerned about white police officers killing your people. What about Black on Black crime? Without them understanding what has created Black on Black crime. So it's kind of like once you know the whole story, once you know the entire story, you understand how the system works, then you're really, really able to then call deflection what it is. It is deflection. It's a psychological concept, a psychological process where the person that you're speaking to is trying to flip your concern over to ensure that you believe that concern is your fault. So the reason I bring this up is because over time, what ends up happening is then you get Black people in bulletproof vests walking in formation who have organized themselves to show forth that they are armed and dangerous. Because when you gather quietly, they release the dogs and fire hoses on you. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like, okay, so if we resist quietly, if we resist non-violently, we're met with pain. If we resist violently, we're met with pain. If we resist through conversation, we're met with deflection. So this is a continuous theme that has occurred to Black people for the entire history that we've been a part of the American story. And that is resistance is never met with change in a racist system, because those who benefit from the system will continuously ensure that you don't believe there is a system at all. And they've also convinced themselves, and they've been socialized to believe that there is no system. So that is my answer to that. It's continual, it's perpetual, and it will perpetuate. We will see these kinds of these acts of resistance until we come up with real strategies that are going to remove the system of racism from our country.
Awesome. And just real quick, I want to recognize there's a slight echo. I don't know if we need to mute. You all okay now? Is the echo gone away? All right. So I just want to recognize Senator Aletha Faust-Goudeau, who's watching, Kansas Senator. And I'm so glad to have you on. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a listener. And for we look for, if you have any comments, Senator, please share those, post those with us. Mary Balasia says, please talk a little more about the recommended deep study for clergy who are pastors and associate pastors, retired clergy. How does that get organized in a Methodist Conference connectional system? Mary, stay tuned for that. We're working on that. And let me say that Dr. Shawn and I did not, this was a program that she's been working on, an idea, a vision she's been working on. She shared with me a YouTube video, and I shared it immediately with Yolanda, and I was like, check this out. And what we were looking at was the clarity of the production. We were like, oh, what kind of equipment is she using? That's so clear. And she's so like, look how great she looks. But then I started listening and I'm like, wow. And so I sent her a text and said, how did I miss you? And so we connected and I said, will you do an online event with me? And she came on. And so there was no prior planning about a program, but that has developed out of this. And I hope to get a chance to work with her and be a part of that. That's the 7 stuff, right? That's how we operate. Like, we don't have time for all this, like, too many discussions and rules and plans. We got to go, man. We have to go. And so, Mary, we will, as that develops, you'll hear more about that. But let me hold off on that. That is not a program that's in place right now. Okay. But thank you for that question. Thank you for showing an interest. That helps. I'm sure that's helpful to Dr. Masheko to give her an incentive to continue on the path that she's on to develop that program. And we'll see how we can be helpful with that. All right. Veda says, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, Veda. That's Veda Boeing, by the way, member of St. Mark. So let me ask our panelists as we're waiting for more comments. Folks are on. I don't know why they're not posting and interacting. I guess they just want to hear from us. What's the one issue regarding race that's going on right now that's most pressing for you? Let me ask each one of you all to share with that on that.
I don't know if I can narrow it down in just one. I mean, we were talking just about the loophole in the 13th Amendment. So the imprisonment of African-American men affects our community in more ways than one. And to see the disparity in between an African-American person being charged for something and a non-African-American being charged for something, and the difference in the sentences that are being given. Just here locally, we have young men that have been incarcerated where there are no facts, there are actually no, what's the word I'm looking for? Nothing that ties them to the crime, and they have been put in jail, book thrown at them for 10 plus years. So until we can close that gap and bring and keep the African-American man home, we're going to continue in this vicious cycle. So, and then you take that and you go to employment. A lot of men that have come out and they are on probation or parole because they can't find gainful employment, then they're right back into the system of doing something that may cause them, they need to take care of their family, or they just need to survive, and they're right back into the system again. So I just think employment and imprisonment are two things that are really hitting home for me right now.
And let me interject here, and then we'll come back to Rachel and Shauna, but we did get a question in. I just want to share it with you all. It says, how do I recognize the white theology I've been immersed in for the last decade? So that's Blanca Velasquez. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Panel Velasquez, Blanca. So I'll take a stab at that at first. Let me just take a stab at that from my perspective, that it was so interesting when I was doing my theological education that even the Black students, that most of us, there was a certain pride we took in our capacity to master white theologians. So we went into seminary, that we started reading. Some of the professors, they would have us read a feminist theology or Black theology or womanist theology, a third world theology, but it was always as, okay, these are helpful. These are supplements that we like to use to help you bounce these off the real stuff. That was kind of, okay. So, you're not doing real theology, or you don't really get theology until you understand Karl Barth or Paul Tillich, who are white German theologians, are the Niebuhr brothers here here that were in New York at Union Theological Seminary. So it was like all this other stuff, Black theology, liberation theology, Latino liberation theology, all those were considered second class, and that you really did not understand or master theology until you understood and interpreted things in the way that the system structure. So we came out of seminary, many of us, and we went back to Black churches. And this is what I was talking to you about earlier, Shauna. We went back to the Black community, and even those of us that were progressives, we preached the theology and the interpretation of the gospel that we had been told in the predominantly white school, that this is the right way to do it. And we were convinced of it. As a matter of fact, we went back with a certain kind of arrogance over those who had not been to seminary, like, these fundamentalists over here are clueless. Let me give you the real stuff. And the real stuff was still a white interpretation of Christianity. So that goes back to the whole issue of reparations and about how deep there needs to be an attempt by the church to really engage in the effort of deconstructing racism from the American story. So that's part of my response to that question. One of you all want to jump in on that, Rachel?
It's actually a question that I was going to pose too, that leads off of this, which is that I'm thinking about the part of White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo that Dr. Mashego read last night, where it talks about the percentages, what percentage of white people are in control of all of this variety of areas of influence, not just in the government. I mean, that's important. But what really stuck with me last night was it's something like, 93% of publishing, 85% of newspapers. It's all in the 80s and 90s. It's not just who's making the laws, and it's not just who's in the court system. It's who's putting the books we read on the shelves, who's putting the news we read in the newspaper. And that's such a high percentage, that it's mind-boggling that is still the percentage, although it shouldn't be. I mean, all of the evidence should make it really like it makes sense, right? That it looks like that. And I think it's so comfortable. And that's really at the heart of what's hard to understand about white supremacy today, that it's not this fringe movement that you're so angry that you react in this certain way. White supremacy exists because it's just so comfortable to be white. It's
Rachel,
so easy to be.
You're getting some
white.
disruption here. So, Rachel, can you hear me?
You don't have to think about it, and so it's comfortable to just keep doing the things you've always done, because that's comfortable for everybody.
Rachel, you're freezing out again. And we don't want,
right? It's comfortable to eat the food your mom made. It's comfortable to, live in the place that you grew up for a lot of people. Seminary because.
Okay, Rachel, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Rachel?
Can you hear me?
Okay, so you were going in and out.
Okay, we're going to try.
We missed some great stuff there. So can you go back about 10 sentences?
Okay, and I'm going to try to get right to the question in case I cut out again.
Okay.
I think the summary is that it is so comfortable in our culture to be white. And if you are not motivated by discomfort, why would you bother to change? And I think that's also a challenge for a lot of our white pastors and white churches. It is comfortable to be a white pastor of a white church if you don't try to create any change. And I don't know about you, but in seminary, I was told the first year you get there, you don't try to change anything. Why? Well, because that would make people uncomfortable, right? They might fire you. And to be fair, you might lose your health insurance. You might not be able to support your family. I mean, it's not just a comfort issue for a lot of people. So when we think about churches putting clergy into a position where they can really affect some change, some desperately needed faithful change, we also have to admit that it's going to be very uncomfortable. And white people are not used to being uncomfortable. And I think that issue of discomfort is something that we have to talk about and acknowledge and go after. We can't just pretend like, oh, it's going to be so easy for us to change our approach here, because we're surrounded by a world that is designed to make us comfortable, or where we're used to feeling comfortable. And that's white fragility too, right? When we're uncomfortable, we cry about it, and then somebody comforts us, and we get right back to that comfortable place.
Amen.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, and then as you're answering that, I'm going to post the next question from Senator Olitha Faust-Goudreau, and then I'm going to, after her, I will post a question from Kai Green. As a matter of fact, I'm going to try to bring Kai Green into the room. I want you guys to meet him. He's a young man. Reuben Eccles has logged in, and we want to. Reuben says you all would have loved Payne Theological Seminary. It is the only freestanding African American seminary in the country, and he says that sounds like he got a lot of the stuff that we're saying seminary should be. That Reuben got that. So Reuben, thank you for tuning in. Kai, I'm going to try to bring you in. Reuben, if you want to come in just peek in for a second, we love to do that. I can send you the link, but let me Yolanda, while you're answering the question, because you're a seminary student, as a matter of fact, you're in the midst of it. So I'm going to post Senator Goudreau's question, but you keep going.
Okay. And I don't want to speak about it from a seminary perspective, because there's so many people online with us that are not in the world of academia. But I just want to say that if you've been engulfed in this white Christian theology at this time, while I'm experiencing this pandemic, you have the opportunity to go to 1,700 different churches every single Sunday. So you can take the opportunity to go to a different church where someone that doesn't look like you is actually leading, and hear the gospel preached from a different perspective. As well as there are Bible studies in different churches that are going on. So if not now, I don't know how you can get it, but Sunday is the most segregated day of the week, has been and continues to be. Go to a church where you are uncomfortable, where you have the opportunity to fellowship with people that have the experiences that you are trying to get away from, or you're trying to learn more about.
Yolanda, that's brilliant. As a matter of fact, we need to record that as when people say, what can I do? That's a great suggestion. During this time of quarantine, this is a great time to go and explore what's happening in other churches and other cultures. And Yolanda, you can do that anonymously. So you can do it without your pastor knowing it. So you don't have to take off from church and your pastor say, where were you last Sunday? So you can show up on your pastor's feed, and then when he or she finishes, then go and explore and do it in this. To some extent, you can kind of do it safely from the context of your home, but begin to explore other cultures and other interpretations. That's a great example. So I'd like to make a note of that as as one of the practicable strategies that folks can use as they begin to move forward. We're going to try. Reuben Eccles wants to come in. I'd like for him to come in just for a second. So you all keep talking. I'm going to try to bring him in. Do you all want? Let's respond to Senator Fausto Godot's question. What can our colleagues do?
I'm typing it into the actual comments for the private chat to give you guys just a little time in advance to have those questions. So go ahead, Dr. Shanna, and then I'll keep typing questions in as they come.
I was just going to say for Blanca Vasquez, she is a friend of mine. And Blanca, what I think Blanca is speaking to is she is a Latina who has been a member of a predominantly white ministry for the last decade. And she just woke up.
The Great Awakening.
Realized that she is being underserved, that she has been underserved, and she now wants to move herself into a place of social justice from the lens of a ministry. That's the kind of conversation we've had. And so one of the things that I think is extremely important is to make those kinds of decisions. If you feel that you are in a ministry where you're not being served, and you have, and I know Blanca has, called your pastor on it, called your clergy leaders on it, and you're not seeing results, then it's time for you to have some difficult conversations and ensure that those people understand that I'm moving my membership and this is why. And it's because as a person of color in this country, I need that my leadership is aware of the challenges that I have as a minority group, an underrepresented group in this society. I need you to understand what I go through. At least I need that you're sensitive and that you're working toward cultural sensitivity. And before I stop, I just want to mention this too. Cultural sensitivity is not the same as political correctness. Being politically correct is a cop-out, in my opinion. Being politically correct means that I'm not going to say what I really think. And I'm not going to do the research to find out how I should address people who are of other people groups. I'm not going to do the work, so I'm just going to stay quiet about it, or I'm going to learn the new terms that each group wants to be called, but I'm going to learn nothing about them. That's political correctness. Yeah. Cultural sensitivity means I've gone inside of that culture, especially as a clergy person. I've gone inside of that culture. I've created relationships inside of that culture. And I am now moving myself into a place where I believe that the people that I'm serving, who are representative of my congregation, we are all equal. Each one of the people groups that I serve is equal one to another. That's cultural sensitivity. So there's a giant difference between those two. And what you'll find in a lot of white congregations is you'll have members of color who are a part of those congregations who are kind of like the token members, so that the pastors can say that they are culturally sensitive, or they are moving in a place of political correctness. And that's not enough. That's not going to do. We need that you are invested in understanding what the true meaning of cultural sensitivity is, so then you can bring us all into the knowledge of what it means to be a Christian in America.
Shauna, that was excellent. That was an excellent distinction that you just made, giving clarity to those two things, and how, as a matter of fact, my wife just said, very good distinction. Very good. Using the same words. And I did not look down and look at her words, Yolanda, and borrow from her. I said it, and then she, whatever, we were saying it and typing it at the same time. But yes, very good distinction. We have Reuben Eccles on. Reuben has been engaged in advocacy and activism for a very long time. I believe now that he is in the DC, living in the DC area, Shauna. So the two of you all need to make a connection. Rachel, you may have known Reuben before I did. He's been engaged for a long time. He and Rabbi Moti Reber know each other. Reuben, you want to welcome. Thank you for coming on, sir. You see Senator Faust-Godot's question. She would want you to give your input, and then I'd like to hear from all the panelists. I'd like for you all to respond to her question. That's a question placed right before us. And so practicable, at least one thing that our white brothers and sisters, our white colleagues, our white clergy, the folks we interact with, whom we love, what can they do to begin to address racism? Reuben, welcome to the conversation, sir.
It's good to be a part of this wonderful conversation. And I'm on my phone. I didn't know I was going to be on here, so I'm outside just chilling. I had to run to the airport to pick up my daughter and everything. So, but again, I wanted to hear this conversation because it's very important for what in these times what is happening. I went to Payne Theological Seminary. It is part of the African Methodist Episcopal denomination. And when I stepped on that campus, it was just incredible to see Dr. Cone come in and teach some classes. To see Eric Michael Dyson, Renita Weems, and all these wonderful African American professors and intellectuals who are on that campus and talking in a very different way than I always heard, being preached from many pulpits, and to begin to talk about womanist theology and that liberation theology just really gave me a passion for social justice. To have Dr. Jeremiah Wright come and speak to us, and just to have those conversations that you did not have on predominantly white campuses, especially where I came from at Wichita State University. And so it gave me a whole different perspective. And I just want to tell this little quick story. I had a professor from Nigeria, Dr. Avotri, and the way I had been taught to do research was that you went in and you footnoted everything, you did all this thing, you got the research from all these white different theologians, and then you basically just kind of regurgitated that stuff back. And so my professor, Dr. Avotri, actually said, you did a great job of going and doing research. Then he threw the paper back at me and he said, if you ever bring this type of stuff to me again, I would thrash you. and he was saying, I want to know what you think. Your opinion and your expertise is important in this. And I never heard that from many of my professors at white universities, predominantly white universities. And now I'm working for Church World Service. It is one of the premier organizations that does resettlement for refugees, works in immigration issues, predominantly, again, white organization, nonprofit, 37 communion partners, basically different denominations. And in the last few years, bringing my training in liberation theology, I literally had to go against that organization and begin to talk about how do they see their work through a racial analysis. They had to this year really begin to dig deep as this organization, because they basically were had colonized in my resettlement work that they were doing. They would get all of the funding, and many times it left out African American churches, African American denominations. We were not reaching them with the information. They only came in as a supplement for the work that they were doing. So the thing that I'm saying to Senator Olitha is that the folks, our white brothers and sisters, they have to do the work. They have to be willing to look deep and begin to deal with the issue through a racial analysis, and they really have to go to work. And so many times we have to be the professors. We have to find the information for them, and now we're saying you have to go and do that work. You have to be a part and willing to go against all the things that you grew up in as normal. And it is not and so many times as African Americans, we feel crazy and they made us feel crazy when we said, no, we're angry about this, and we should be angry. We have a right to be angry. And so, but we don't have to let that anger, as we say, lead us to sin, but it leads us to making sure that we have the information, making sure that we are as best as we can to able to lead people into understanding that at this time we need our white allies to listen to what we're saying, begin to do the research, not feel like they are threatened when we talk and when we're talking, be able to understand that we bring leadership, we bring all the tangibles to every organization that we are in, and we just need you to listen, but then go to work and do the deep work of what it takes to study what we and the things that we have been saying and doing all this time. I hope that makes sense.
Reuben, that's awesome. Awesome, man. It's so good to have you on. Thank you for that comment and participation. I hope that you are in the DC area, aren't you?
Yes, we do advocacy work. We're doing basically virtual Hill visits, and it has been a incredible thing to see in the last 4 months with the COVID-19 and all the issues around policing reform, to see these organizations, these predominantly white organizations, who are truly saying we have to step back and make sure that when we go on the Hill, we are on every basically on this on the issues around criminal reform and defunding the police, around SNAP, around housing issues. These organizations, again, from Network to Bread to Faith in Action. I mean, across the board, they are doing some serious work, advocacy work, and working with the Congressional Black Congress to make sure that the issues that are so important to the African American communities are actually being addressed, and the allies are really going to work. It is really beautiful to see these folks standing up and saying, "Hey, we need to speak up. We can no longer sit back and be silent or do advocacy work in a way that is non-threatening to our white partner." Wow. So they're making those issues known, and we are meeting. We met with Mitch McConnell's group. We're meeting with, especially in Kansas. I wanted to say, brother Johnson, Rev, we've talked about it pretty much, but it is so important this year that our folks get out and vote in Kansas, and that they go to work and making sure they pressure Mitch McConnell right now on the SNAP issue, because this year he's leaving. And so this is a wonderful time for pastors in the state of Kansas to go to his office and say, we need you to fund SNAP at a 15% higher level, so that we can make sure your constituents are eating, they have the right nutrition. And so these are the things that we're bringing, and that people from all the country are doing on the Hill visits. And so, yeah, we are in DC, and folks are going to work.
As a matter of fact, I just want to thank you, Reuben, so much. That's a response from Senator Palacios. Thank you so much, Reuben, for coming on. I'm going to add one other person here to the stream just very quickly. But as I'm doing that, Rachel and Shawn, you all want to respond to Senator Palacios' question?
Well, if it's okay, I'd like to respond with this. So Dr. Robin DiAngelo in White Fragility explains lots of things, but there was a video that I saw her present to the United Methodist Church. She was speaking to clergy from the United Methodist Church, and this is what she said. She said, "My psychosocial development was inculcated in the water of white supremacy, not the KKK, but a system where white people are central and seen as inherently superior to people of color. My personality was formed in that water. My worldview was formed in that water. And I I choose that it is not my fault. I'm not racked with guilt about it, but I am responsible for changing it. Because the default of our society is the reproduction of racism. It's built into every system and every institution. If we move on into our lives in the most comfortable ways for us, we will reproduce it. There is no neutral space. Inaction is a form of action. You can be a good person and also be a racist. Racism is a system. It's virtually impossible for people of color to give feedback to white people due to their defense reflex. So these are reflections from Dr. Robin DiAngelo, who wrote White Fragility. So when I look at the question that Mrs. Goudot posted, and I also hear the response that I'm hearing from the gentleman who's here with us. What amazes me about it all is when you look at, and I look at everything from a researcher anthropological standpoint. When you look at it all, initiatives and movement and all of these actions, they are fantastic. But the problem is at the root of the thinking of those who feel that something is wrong and how they address the issues that they're uncovering. So therefore, what if you do not attack the thing from the root, then what you'll get is a bunch of initiatives that create temporary change for small groups of people. But what you won't get is systemic change. And so because we have a system at work that is very ancient, it is the system that we're watching play out in America is a part of the DNA system, the thinking errors that we live inside of are a part of thinking errors that are centuries old. So at the end of the day, until we address those thinking errors, we will never be able to get to a place of full reform where we have criminal justice reform and we have wage gap reformation and we have all of these areas that need to be justified, where the playing field is now level, everyone has the same tools. We won't be able to get there until white people in this country understand that racism is real and they benefit from it and are responsible for changing the system.
Wow. Systemic change, because it was built into the very structure of who we are as a nation. And so if we're going to really bring full healing, then we've got to deal with it at that level. Although that does not, as a matter of fact, let me post a question, and then I want to welcome Kyron Green on. Kyron Green, who is a young, evolving clergy person, community leader, works in corporate America, lives there in College Station, Texas. Welcome on, Kai. Thank you for coming on. You have an opening, want to make a comment here? Have an open stage, just say some words to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Being a former tech guy, I was going to be embarrassed if I messed that up, but that's kind of my business these days, is what I do. But no, like you said, I'm glad to be here. Number one, I'm so excited to hear the discussion that I'm hearing. I recently just took a job in the last week to become the VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at an organization. As I've talked to you, Robert, I've had opportunities to pastor, and I keep getting asked to come back home. But my concern has been is that the church has not been in a place to really affect the type of change that I'm passionate about. Trying to do that among predominantly white churches, Black churches, I've had a lot of pushback, even try to do it through the consulting route and banging your head against the wall and saying, I help lead a successful company, like building culture, like I have an idea. And not seeing those things work has really, for me, caused a lot of frustration. And quite frankly, I've kind of stepped away from the church a little bit. Not that my faith has dwindled, but I just decided I'm not going to keep trying to roll this ball up the hill when it doesn't want to go. And so I see this opportunity now in corporate America, also through nonprofit work that I do, to actually start to address these issues. And what I heard is one of the first conversations I had with our organization. I said, everybody's stressing education. I said, but the scaffolding by which you navigate that education is important, because because what's going to happen is we can give them stats and we can do bias conscious, or we can do all these different things. But what happens is a person who's thinking, if the thinking is still off, they're just going to weaponize that education, which is what Black people have faced time and time again. And so what I heard said, and the way I've been communicating it is that for too long, we have accepted the idea of equality. And to me, equality leads to tolerance, right? But we have to get to a point where we're able to identify empathy, because empathy will lead to equity. And we have not been in that place for so long, because everybody's like, oh, well, we gave this to the Black race and you guys now have this. Yes, thank you for letting me sit at the table. Thank you for letting me vote. But here's the thing, until your hearts and mind changes, that piece of paper that is supposed to guarantee my rights and my freedom is no more than a piece of paper. I had the conversation, someone was telling me, well, Kyron, you should carry a gun. You're in Texas, protect yourself. And I said, I have a right to do that, but I'm 6'6", I'm a huge guy. I wear a gun and now I'm just an extra target, right? So I said, so your rights do not give me freedom. Your rights give me oppression. That is an equity problem. That is not an equality problem. So again, like I was telling my friend, I can't be free until you allow me to be free, not just on paper, but in your person. So I'm just excited to be here. This is wonderful. So yeah.
Wow. So I know. So that's why I see now why you were really connecting with Shauna and her what she's putting together in her approach, because that ties in exactly with your journey and your perspective. I want to come back to Rachel for a minute, and then we'll circle back to Kyron and Shauna and Yolanda. Rachel, you want to jump back in here, please?
I think the one thing I want to say, and it's been hinted at, and I just want to make sure that we say it somewhere in this space, is that I owe so much to the Poor People's Campaign. If you haven't heard about the Poor People's Campaign, learn about the Poor People's Campaign. And I owe so much to what I've learned from the Kansas Poor People's Campaign and working with the national staff. And one of the words that I've learned that I love, that I rely on, is directly affected person. So I think if we are listening to a directly affected person say, it's like this, and we want to do that deflection thing that Dr. Masheko talked about and say, no, it's not like that. If we could only do one single thing, if we white people could only do one single thing, it would be to stop doing that, to say, this is a directly affected person. So even if I think they're wrong, I'm going to assume they're right. I'm just going to suspend my disbelief here and say, okay, well, what if they were? What if this were really the truth? And I'm going to act on that assumption, that the directly affected person. And I would hope that so many of us, women have experienced what it is like for a man to say, oh, no, that's not sexism. People who are differently abled have experienced what it is like for an ableist person to say, you're not being inconvenienced here. So there should be white people who can draw on experiences. We're all directly affected in some way by something that we can draw on to say, that's that empathy, to say, this person is speaking about their experience and it is true for them, even if it's not true for me. And what can I learn from that? How could I help that redirect my advocacy priorities? I think this is the problem, but they're saying this is the problem, and maybe they're actually right. And maybe both of us could have something that we contribute. So that word, directly affected person, I think we need to say, am I directly affected? Then maybe I should be listening to somebody who is. If in this particular case, am I directly affected by incarceration rates? Not really, not in my life, not in my family. So how about if I listen to people who are, for just as one issue? So I'm so thankful to know about and be a very small part of the Poor People's Campaign. And I hope we keep spreading the word about that organization too, and that movement. And okay, last thing, because that is what Jesus did, right? Jesus listened to directly affected people, and he never said, no, you're wrong. That's not what is affecting you. He almost always asked a question, right? Sometimes he helped people say, what you think is holding you back is not what is holding you back. That was Jesus. That's where I'm not Jesus. But he listened, he met with, he heard, he saw directly affected people who no one else was hearing and seeing. So as people of faith, we also have to tie that in, that has to be our calling too. Okay, thank you. I'm done.
So great stuff, Rachel. This has been so rich. And I know we said we were going to go, we got cut off. We were going to go to 7:15. What time is Mario coming on? We have another broadcast that St. Mark does we had to push that back. They're going to come on, and I don't want to get cut off again. So I'm asking you all this publicly.
He's on this feed, I believe, so he knows that we're going a little longer, I assume, but I'll follow up with him.
Okay. Again, I want to thank Reuben Eccles for chiming in. Reuben, we look forward to doing a conversation with just the two of us. I look forward to doing that with you, particularly as we draw closer to the election. I know that is one of your passions is turning out the vote, and that is so important this fall. We've got to do that. And so I look forward to doing that. But I'd like to ask you all, I think that this panel, and I'm so glad, Kyron, man, in that one statement, you just enlarged the conversation. As a young adult, as someone, we talked a little about the frustration that young adults are feeling about the church. And so we've got to deal with that. But I like for this panel, I think we need to commit. I've been surprised at the number of people who have tuned in, how people have stayed on, the number of views after the broadcast ended. I'm just astonished. I think we are doing a great work here that's beneficial. I think we need to continue provide this platform and have these conversations between us, but also inviting others in. And so I like for you all to think about and pray about committing. I don't know if that's once a week, an hour a week, or once a month, whatever, but continuing and bringing Kyron in, continuing this conversation and continuing to provide a platform for us to begin to do this. You all know that was one of my practicable strategies, is that we've got to continue to engage in conversations, particularly when they're hard, particularly across the boundaries, political, racial, because we have to be able to learn to, and Sarah Oglesby gave us this phrase that we love so much, leaning in, to lean into that when things are tough, when the conversations are tough, instead of backing away, instead of rejecting, leaning in with love and engaging. And we've got to practice that. And I think this can be a platform where we can begin to do that. Mary refers to the word Ubuntu, which means to some degree, I am because we are. Okay, because we are, I am. Or another way of putting it, I can't be who I need to be until we are who we need to be. So that sense of both individuation, but connected to community, that's so important. Yes, Mary, you and I both love that concept and have talked about it and have preached about it. And so thank you for bringing that up. So as we've got to draw this to a close. So we I know. So, but what I want to do is go back around and give each one of you an opportunity to make a final statement. So, and I'd like to end with Shauna. Shauna, you close us out, and then at that point, then we'll be done, and then we can talk offline. I will reach out to you all through text or email, and we'll try to determine a time that we can come back together on a regular basis and facilitate this kind of conversation. Okay, so Yolanda, I keep calling on you to go first.
I don't mind. Okay. Yes. So what I want to say, I want to respond just briefly to Senator Elisa Falscado's question from just a layman's perspective. I really like what you said, Kai, about taking the information and weaponizing, but knowing that you can't be free until the people are affected enough to empathize with our plight. So what I want to say to that is, what can our Caucasian colleagues do? And I'm saying it over and over again, is take our plight to your dinner party. Take our plight to your business meeting that I'm not invited to. Now, I need to caution you, because you probably won't be invited back. But everywhere that you go, that you have people in the room that don't look like us, that tend to have that group think, take these conversations into those environments that we're not welcome in, and begin to upset those environments to let people know that we're not going to stand for it across the board. That's the best way that I believe that people can help us. I think you're on mute, Pastor.
Kyra, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I had so many things on my head to say. I can just kind of shoot straight from the hip sometimes. But I think what I would say this and kind of couch for my head is in the number of conversations I'm having, even though I don't want to take my own advice, what I would tell everybody at this point too is just to try to gain some perspective on this. Number one, it looks crazy, it feels crazy, it is crazy, but we're going to make it through this, right? And we have to think about how things change. And right now we're in a season of hearing. There's so much pain. People are acting out from statues and monuments being torn down. Don't let that rattle you. That's just the hearing. It's almost like an overcorrection if you were driving, right? Everybody overcorrects and you swing back. And so some people are doing some things that don't quite make sense. So we're in that hearing phase. To everyone to ask, how can I be an ally? Continue to give both grace and space to allow people to express where they are. You don't have to understand it, but listen, allow that space, hear it. Secondly, if you can hear it, let those things settle in your heart. That's where the empathy begins to play out. If you can let things settle in your heart, then between the two races or between any other marginalized group, we can start to see a little bit of healing. And once the healing starts, it can then go to our hands. Our hands is us taking action, right? Because you're not going to stand with somebody, you're not going to help somebody that you've not made room in your heart for and that you have not heard, okay? So now is a season of hearing. Be faithful and know that we're going to move into the season of the heart, in my opinion, where more of these stories are being told and accepted. And at that point, once it settles in the heart, I think we'll see actions, not just legislation that leads to the works of the hands, which is what we need, and ultimately, which is equity. So that's it.
Great stuff. Rachel?
The only thing I want to say is thank you. It's such an honor to be in this space. I've learned so much in the last 3 nights. I'm grateful to be here. I especially want to say I heard Pastor Yolanda say it on the first night, and I heard you say it again just now. Take this conversation into the rooms where this group of people cannot always go or is not always invited. Take this conversation into those rooms. I heard you twice. I'm paying attention. I'm gonna share that message, and I'm gonna take that message to heart. So thank you for making it so abundantly clear, and thank you all for all of the incredible learning that has happened in the last few nights.
Thank you for coming on, Rachel. It's been a delight to have you. Yes, yeah. And our special guest and featured presenter, thank you so much for being on. Give us your closing comments.
So I want to say 2 things. Usually the reason why information education is weaponized by white people is simply because they have not grown to a place of empathy, because they're not willing to yet see their white fragility. They're not able to recognize their privilege. And that's the reason why the approach that we need to take, if the church is going to lead the initiative in the erasure of racist, systemic, this sickness that is inside of our society, if the church is going to lead the fight against institutionalized racism in America, we have to have a 3-fold approach. It has to be mental and behavioral, it has to be education, and it has to be spiritual reconnection with a real and true Jesus, the one who was the revolutionary for social justice on earth. And then I want to also mention, there is something very interesting that's happening in the United States right now. All of the anthropologists I know are looking at this phenomenon. And what's going on is California, Texas, New Mexico, and Hawaii have already flipped from majority minority states to minority majority states. And what happens when that occurs is you get this fight, you get this fear from the white previous majority in those areas. And the first thing they do is they use the tactic of voter suppression. Voter suppression is how Stacey Abrams lost the election in 2018 when the man that she was running against was the Secretary of State of Georgia, who was able to have direct access to the entire voting process. So they dealt with weird things like no electrical cords for the electronic voting machines, taking thousands of people off of the voter rolls. Voter suppression is real. And the reason why it's real and it's never gone away and it's going to get worse is because Georgia and Arizona are now also flipping the majority minority. And so what we have to watch out for as the church, we have to be in a place where we're ready for that fight as well. Why is that fight so important? Because what's going to occur is you're going to see this almost natural shift from the white rulers, those who've been in control of all of the policies in these states. They are now going to become underrepresented because of these minority groups that are mobilizing and voting. They know that. They're looking at the data just like we're looking at the data. And so what they're doing is figuring out ways to suppress the vote. So we as the church, we need to be equipped. We need to be ready so that we may engage and fight against this voter fraud that we're about to see clearly articulated in America, which is going to help to ensure that the system of racism, this racialized capitalist system that we live in, perpetuates. So that's what we need to be on guard for. So I would say to you, in your community, not only is it important enough for you to go and vote, always think about the fact that once you cast your vote, did your vote get counted? Have you ensured that you know exactly where you are to go to vote? Because that's one of the other things that they're doing is they're changing the polling places so that people are confused about where they should vote. Why are they doing this? They're doing this because the Latino, the Asian, and the Black communities are growing at a quicker rate than your white populace is growing. So they're flipping over the authority of policymaking. So we need to be on guard and ready to help with that as the church.
Wow, what a great closeout. What a great closeout. So I hope that at the end of this, that we are definitely leaving this conversation with a greater awareness of our need to engage in the electoral process. I want to review those three things. This is you propose an approach that includes addressing mental and behavioral changes, educational changes, and then the spiritual dimension, which I am so proud of you for including that, because again, so much of my work in the field of activism and advocacy, folks want to leave that component out. But I deeply believe that there's a spiritual component that's probably more real than anything else. And that it's part of what got constituted, which is part of the reason, and Rachel and I want to engage in this conversation about a spiritual, a church-based reparation. So not financial reparations, but getting the church to engage in restorative justice because of its participation in the creation of a racist society. So we look forward to doing that. Shawn, I'd like to close with this. You read some statistics last night, and Rachel, Yolanda, and I we were all going like, wow, 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 wow. And I've gotten comments, text messages, emails today with people saying, that I had no idea, like, that the racism is so covered and is so kept and it's so deeply seated that we're not even aware, but it's right there. But you read some numbers about almost every field and every level, every sphere, how they are all predominantly dominated by white people. And so not just a matter of no Black presence, no Latino presence, no Asian presence, no Muslim American presence. And so would you read those statistics? And then after those statistics, then we will say goodbye to you. I just want you all to hear those one more time. Again, all the resources, if you want to get a list of the books that we've talked about, if you email me, we can get those. I can get you that list. We've talked about White Fragility. We've talked about Stamped from the Beginning. We've talked about Cornel West, Race Matters. There's a book called The Half Has Never Been Told that tells a story of how capitalism was built on the backs of Black slaves, and so many other awesome books. Again, I want Rachel, thank you for mentioning the Poor People's Campaign, the national campaign, but also the Kansas Poor People's Campaign. And also we've mentioned KIFA, Kansas Interfaith Action. That's the work that Rachel and I do. And Kyron is in College Station, Texas, and I pastor there. You're in Austin, Texas now. That's right. You're in Austin, Texas now. You're in Austin, Texas now. If we had more time, I'd tell a story about that. But we are out of time. So, Shauna, if you can, do you have those statistics ready? Let's review them for us one more time.
So the 10 richest as of 2016, 2017, so 3 years ago, 10 richest Americans, 100% white, 7 of whom are among the 10 richest in the world. U.S. Congress, 90% white. U.S. governors, 96% white. U.S. Congress, 90% white. Top military advisors, 100% white. The president and the vice president, 100% white. U.S. House Freedom Caucus, 99% white. Current U.S. presidential cabinet, 91% white. People who decide which TV shows we see, 93% white. People who decide which books we read, 90% white. People who decide which news is covered, 85% white. People who decide which music is produced, 95% white. People who directed the 100 top grossing films of all time worldwide were 95% white. Teachers are 82% white. Full-time college professors, 84% white. Owners of men's professional football teams, 97% white.
Wow. Wow.
That's White Fragility by Dr. Reuben D'Angelo.
There it is. There it is. As a matter of fact, that's a comment from your friend there. That's as explicit. And then there's a comment there from Sherry Whitaker. Wow. So that kind of information, I was not aware of just how widespread that kind of supremacy is. And it's not a matter, let me say this, it's not a matter of saying, okay, how can we get Black dominance? That's not the point. The point is changing society to the degree that our leadership and our participation in multiple levels of leadership in our country represents the demographic of our country, so that there are people of all races and people of all sexual orientations and people of different faiths are represented in decision making in our country. That's what America is really all about. That's what America is really all about. And so thank you guys for coming on. We'll talk offline. I'll send you all an email. We'll start a group text or something and try to get together on a date so that we can continue these conversations. Thank all of you who tuned in. Mary Belasia, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for sending the letter. Reuben Eccles, thank you again for coming on and especially for reminding us of the importance of this upcoming electoral cycle. And of course, Shauna came back and backed that up. I so deeply value and appreciate each one of you. I think each one of you, you are so smart and so bright and so aware of what's going on. And it has been a delight to engage in this conversation with you. Thomas Douglas just chimed in. I got to mention him, Thomas Douglas. So many of you all are watching Hamilton as you're quarantined. Thomas Douglas was Leslie Odom's professor and mentor at Carnegie Mellon School of Music. And yes, and he during the summer, he's here in Wichita. He directs the Wichita Orchestra. He's a member of St. Mark. When he's here, he visits with us. He did not come because there is no, basically that's been shut down for the summer, but he stays in tune, and he just posted a comment, and let me just show that to you all. Just a wonderful guy, wonderful guy. Thomas, thank you for tuning in. I wish if I had known you were on, I would have pulled you on just to say hello. Linda and I and Kayla are gonna watch Hamilton tonight, and so I'll celebrate the play as well as celebrate your work with Leslie. All right, guys, thank you all so much. God bless you, and I look forward to following up with you all at a later time. Bye-bye.